On a hot summer night in 1976, a modest home in Travers, France, was awoken by the sound of shattering glass and the roar of flames. What secrets did the fire destroy, and what justice did it aim to serve? This is the story of the brutal murder of Joachim Peiper. The name Joachim Peiper is instantly recognizable to most Americans with a passing knowledge of World War II. He was the commander of the Waffen-SS battle group, held responsible for multiple war crimes, including the Malmedy massacre of American prisoners of war during Hitler's Ardennes offensive. At the time of his 1946 trial by a US Army court, he was called the most hated man in the United States. But where did he get his start? Joachim Peiper was born into a middle-class German family in Berlin in 1915. From an early age, he was influenced by his father's military service and nationalist ideologies. So it came as no surprise when Peiper joined the Hitler Youth at 18 and volunteered for the SS in 1933, rapidly advancing through its ranks. Peiper's adeptness and charisma caught Heinrich Himmler's attention, positioning him as a model SS officer candidate. After graduating from the SS Officer Academy, Joachim Peiper joined Adolf Hitler's circle and quickly distinguished himself as a reliable bodyguard. Despite not being as tall, blonde, and muscular as the Nordic recruits to the SS, Peiper compensated by being a handsome, personable, and self-confident SS officer. Positioned closely to Himmler, Peiper personified the ruthless execution of the National Socialist agenda, leading to his appointment as first adjutant. This role put him at the heart of the SS's operations and close to the formulation of policies during the occupation of Poland. His proximity to Himmler and the SS's top command not only solidified his status within Nazi hierarchy, but also directly implicated him in the regime's atrocities from the war's earliest days. While at Himmler's side, he witnessed the execution of Polish leaders who were thought to be potential future partisans, the gassing of mentally ill patients, the operation of concentration camps, and the SS's gradual administrative refinement of ethnic cleansing methods. As Himmler's first adjutant, Peiper delivered to him the daily kill counts of the ongoing ethnic cleansing. With the war escalating, Peiper's ambition and his commitment to the Nazi cause led him to seek a more active role in the military operations of the Third Reich. His request to be transferred to a combat unit was eventually granted. Peiper's career then took him from working as a personal bodyguard to the front lines. By 1941, as the German war machine turned its sight towards the Soviet Union with Operation Barbarossa, Peiper found himself on the Eastern Front. The operation, driven by the Nazi regime's insatiable hunger for land and resources, quickly devolved into a campaign of unparalleled brutality and devastation. This period marked the beginning of some of the most harrowing atrocities committed by the Nazi regime, driven by their ideological goals to eradicate communism, conquer the Western Soviet Union, and repopulate it with Germans. The operation aimed to secure oil reserves of the Caucasus as well as the agricultural resources of the Soviet territories, ultimately seeking to create more living space for Germany. With plans for the eventual extermination or Germanization of the native Slavic peoples. Operation Barbarossa itself was marked by horrific violence, including mass shootings, gassing operations by German death squads, and the deliberate starvation or killing of millions of Soviet prisoners of war and civilians. The Hunger Plan, specifically, was designed to address German food shortages by exterminating the Slavic population through starvation and hoarding more resources for Germany. On one occasion during this time, around 20 civilians, mainly women and children, were hiding in the cellar of a building. Unfortunately, that very spot ended up being used by the soldiers fighting against Peiper and his unit. After the Allies were defeated, the Germans tossed 2 grenades down the cellar door. The explosions only wounded one person, but the screams of panic alerted the soldiers. They herded the civilians up and out of the house, claiming that they must have been firing at them before. The victims, 23 in number, were lined up against a hedge and shot, with only a German-speaking woman and her daughters spared. This was part of a pattern of atrocities committed by Peiper's unit. By the end of 1943, Peiper had developed a reputation in the Nazi press as a ruthless leader and was promoted to lieutenant colonel. Nazi propaganda painted him as a brilliant and quick-thinking commander with unorthodox orders, while neglecting to mention his high casualty rates. which usually resulted from his overly aggressive style that neglected scouting in favor of a full-on assault with vehicles and infantry regardless of the situation. Peiper was particularly eager to burn down villages and once wrote to a colleague, "Our reputation precedes us as a wave of terror and is one of our best weapons. Even old Genghis Khan would gladly have hired us as his assistants." Peiper's actions earned him the German Cross in gold and his unit the nickname Blowtorch Battalion. Despite his callous disregard for life, or perhaps because of it, Peiper accompanied Himmler on a tour of German-occupied territories to check on the state of SS operations and participated in a conference where Himmler presented plans to kill 30 million people in Eastern Europe. Despite having no experience with tanks, Peiper was made commander of the division's 1st Tank Regiment. Thanks to his overly aggressive style, the regiment was down to 12 working tanks after a single month of his leadership. He was relieved and assigned to a staff position to ensure he didn't cause any more damage. Meanwhile, his propaganda fame reached even higher levels, and Hitler presented him with the oak leaves for his Knight's Cross before announcing his final plan for the Third Reich, the Ardennes Offensive. The Ardennes Offensive, also known as the Battle of the Bulge, was Hitler's last major offensive against the Allies on the Western Front during World War II, and on a bitterly cold day in December 1944, a convoy of American soldiers was ambushed by Peiper and his men near the crossroads at Balnez, close to the Belgian town of Malmedy. The Americans, caught by surprise and outgunned, surrendered to the SS troops, expecting to be taken as prisoners of war. However, the norms of warfare and the Geneva Convention were callously disregarded by Peiper. The captured American soldiers were disarmed and assembled in a field near the crossroads. Without warning or justification, SS troops opened fire on the unarmed prisoners with machine guns. As the initial volley of bullets tore through the ranks of the captured soldiers, chaos ensued. Some tried to flee, others played dead, hoping the SS men would pass them by. But the SS troops methodically moved among the fallen Americans, shooting any who showed signs of life at point-blank range. In total, 86 American soldiers were massacred at Balnez Crossroads, their bodies left in the snow. And the brutality did not end with the massacre. A group of survivors seeking refuge in a nearby cafe were ruthlessly pursued. The building was set ablaze by Peiper's unit, and those who attempted to escape the flames were summarily executed. But despite achieving surprise and creating a bulge in the Allied front lines, the German offensive eventually faltered due to stiff American resistance, lack of reinforcements, and the eventual intervention of Allied air support as the weather cleared. The Allies, energized by their victory in the Ardennes, pressed their advantage. They pushed into the heart of Germany from the west. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union launched massive offensives from the east. The pincer movement of these Allied advances led to the collapse of Nazi Germany, culminating in Hitler's suicide and the unconditional surrender of German forces in May 1945, effectively ending World War II in Europe. With the war lost, Joachim was ordered to surrender to American troops in early May. Peiper defied the order and traveled home, but was captured within the month and charged with war crimes in 1946. He was then sent to the Dachau concentration camp, which had been repurposed into a makeshift courtroom. Peiper's trial, known as the Malmedy massacre trial, was part of the Dachau trials held between 1945 and 47 to prosecute war crimes. Peiper's unit was accused of massacring more than 300 US Army prisoners of war and around 100 Belgian civilians across several locations between December 1944 and January 1945. 7 Malmedy survivors testified at the trial, which began on May 16th. Belgian civilian witnesses to the murder of unarmed civilians also testified. Members of the SS stated under oath. Much of the testimony was written with nearly 100 sworn statements brought before the court, including confessions and statements by some defendants, informing on some of their co-defendants. The uniformed defendants sat with numbered identification cards around their necks. Only some were given the opportunity to take the stand. The prosecution argued that the murder of American POWs and others carried out by Peiper and his men was premeditated, the result of Hitler's orders for a ruthless campaign to inspire fear and terror. The defense maintained that the killings had taken place in the heat of battle. After the proceedings came to an end, the American military court at Dachau sentenced 46 members of the SS, including Joachim Peiper, to death by hanging. Another 23 were given life imprisonment, and the remaining men received sentences between 10 and 20 years. The sentence, however, was not the end for Peiper. The trial and its public outcome sparked a legal and moral debate. Amid allegations of coerced confessions and procedural irregularities, the initial verdicts faced scrutiny. So over time, Peiper's sentence was commuted first to life imprisonment and then again to 35 years. Peiper was released in December 1956, having served less than 12 years. After his release, he found employment with Porsche and Volkswagen, and later moved to France to work as a freelance translator. In Treves, France, he lived in a modest home with his wife, enjoying a relatively secluded life until a hate campaign against him began in 1976, following the exposure of his identity. This campaign resulted in the arson of his house on July 14, 1976, Bastille Day. The small, secluded house burned to the ground with him inside, and authorities weren't made aware of the fire until it had mostly put itself out. No one was ever officially charged with Peiper's murder, but an anonymous telephone caller told the Paris newspaper L'Hora that a freedom fighter group called the Avengers had killed the war criminal. Curiously, the day after Peiper was killed, his wife and 2 daughters returned to the house from a visit to Switzerland. They visited the ruins of the house, picked up some belongings that had not been burned, and left the town without a word, leaving behind Joachim Peiper's body and his legacy of terror. Well, that's it. We hope you enjoyed our video. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more fascinating history content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.